You need to hear about the night a park ranger found 5 men covered in blood that wasn't there when they fell asleep. Because it happened less than a day's drive from where you're probably sitting right now, deep in the Appalachian Mountains. And to this day, nobody's ever explained where that blood came from. In April of 2015, in North Carolina's Linville Gorge, a stretch of backcountry so steep and signal dead that search teams still call it the last true blind spot east of the Mississippi, 71-year-old Reba Coffey called dispatch from her own back porch, the same porch she'd watched that hollow off Kistler Memorial Highway from every evening for 11 years, because there was smoke coming out of a chimney that had been stone cold for 2 winters, and nobody was supposed to be up there. What the ranger found inside didn't match a single line on her report sheet. 5 college-aged men in matching purple robes, laid out in a perfect circle in front of a lit hearth, unconscious but breathing steady. Every inch of every one of them soaked in fresh, warm blood, with not one visible wound between them. And with a mountain storm already closing off the only road out, she was about to find out the hard way that she wasn't as alone up there as she should have been. This is Ranger Birdie Napier's story. Dispatch didn't waste time arguing with Reba Coffey. In 11 years watching that hollow, she'd called in 4 things and been right every time. So when she said smoke was coming from a chimney dead 2 winters, the call went straight to Ranger Birdie Napier. Napier was half-packed for her grandson Waylon's opening Little League game when it came through. Backup was 40 minutes out on a wreck near Table Rock. She grabbed her kit and took the spur alone. The gravel narrowed fast under a tunnel of rhododendron. A mile in, her truck thudded hard over something buried in the leaf litter. A branch, she told herself, and kept driving. The kind of small lie a person tells so they don't have to stop the truck alone on a dead road. She wouldn't know for years this was the good part of the night, or why the thud never left her. The cabin sat at the spur's end. The first thing wrong with it was the power line, severed in one clean cut, not torn, not storm-snapped. Inside, lantern light, a hearth going strong, pine smoke climbing a chimney dead 2 winters. A radio playing soft static country from the dark. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like somebody's idea of a campfire story. She pushed the door open on 5 men laid in a dead-still circle. Purple robes, 5 silver goblets between them. Every man soaked through with blood, drying dark at the edges, and not one visible cut anywhere to explain it. She moved fast. Wrist to wrist to wrist, pulse steady, pulse steady. All 5 breathing slow and even, like men asleep instead of 5 bodies bled out on a floor. Contained, solvable. She let herself have that for exactly 1 second. Then something wet hit the floorboards, an inch from her boot. She didn't clock it. Elbow deep in the 5th man's collar, checking his airway. It hit again. A drip, steady, falling from a closed trap door set directly into the ceiling above her head. By the door, in a row nobody had counted, sat 6 pairs of boots. For 5 men. Napier got 1 bar of signal by the window and used it fast. Dispatch had fielded 6 prank calls that spring already, and the dispatcher's voice came through flat, already decided. 5 college kids in robes, empty goblets, probably some fraternity ritual that got out of hand. Sounds like a stunt, not a scene, he said. He wasn't sending anyone up that spur in a storm for a stunt. She was still arguing when the call dropped. Underneath it, unanswered, sat a text from her daughter-in-law, sent 20 minutes earlier and still glowing on the lock screen. Waylon's up first. Game starts at 10. Don't be late. She looked at it a second longer than she should have. Down at the field, somebody's kid was tying his cleats in the sun. Up here, the light hadn't made it past the tree line all afternoon. She put the phone away and didn't answer, and some part of her already knew she wouldn't get the chance to. Organizing her kit by the door, she started stacking wet boots out of the walkway without meaning to count them. 6 pairs. 5 men breathing on the floor behind her. She counted twice, the way a person does when the first number doesn't sit right, and got 6 both times. She left the goblets alone after that, 5 of them, empty, rinsed almost clean except for a faint sweetness clinging to the rims. Elderberry, maybe. The kind of thing a person drinks at a wedding toast and never thinks about again. She stopped counting those too. She started counting exits instead. 1 door. 1 window that hadn't opened past 6 inches since it was painted shut, decades before she was born. 1 truck, parked 40 yards down the spur, alone in the rain. She went for the truck. The storm had thickened while she worked the circle, rain coming sideways now, cold enough to numb her fingers by the time she reached the driveway gate. She crouched at the rear tire to check the tread before she risked the spur in the dark, and found it already flat. Not blown, not a slow highway leak. A clean puncture low on the sidewall, the kind made on purpose with something narrow and sharp, the mud crusted dry around the hole. Hours old at least. She checked the other rear tire with numb fingers. Same cut, same age. The thud on the drive-in hadn't been a branch. Whoever had done this hadn't needed to be standing in that driveway when her truck rolled over it. They only needed to know that a ranger who found 5 unconscious men wasn't going to walk away. Flat tires or not, storm or not. They didn't have to force her hand. They only had to be right about who she was, and they had been. That was the part that sat wrong with her, crouched in the mud with rain running down the back of her collar. A wild animal doesn't plan around a person's training. This had. Above the gorge, the last gray light gave out all at once, the way it does when a storm finally makes up its mind. The radio in her hand crackled once and went dead. Not low battery. Dead. The kind that meant the tower serving this stretch of Burke County had gone down somewhere between here and dispatch. Visibility dropped to nothing past the porch rail in the same 60 seconds. The tree line swallowed whole, the driveway gate gone behind a wall of gray. She stood there soaked through, listening to 5 men breathe behind a door she couldn't leave, looking at a truck she couldn't drive anywhere. The storm hadn't taken her only way off that mountain. It had simply gotten around, finally, to telling her the truth about it. That the moment she parked at the end of that spur and walked through that door, the road out had already stopped being hers to use. She went back inside anyway, boots filling with rainwater, the 6 pairs by the door still 1 too many. There wasn't another option left worth considering, not anymore. With no truck and no road, Napier ran the one test she still had a use for. A field presumptive swab from her kit. 1 strip, 1 drop, 5 minutes on a stopwatch to tell her whether the blood-soaking 5 men was even human before she decided how to treat it. She pressed the strip into the crook of Tucker Sizemore's collar, the one whose pulse had run weakest since she walked in, and started the clock. 5 minutes doesn't sound like much until it's the only thing happening in a room. The hearth popped once and went quiet. Rain worked the tin roof in long, even sheets, the only clock she had left besides the one ticking down in her hand. 5 men breathed in a circle around her, slow and steady, any one of them capable of opening his eyes before the timer ran out, and she had no way of knowing which one or what he'd do when he did. She kept her hand resting near her belt the whole 5 minutes. She didn't need it. She kept it there anyway. The timer went off. Human. Confirmed. It was the one answer she'd been half hoping would come back wrong, because human closed off exactly nothing. It didn't tell her whose. It didn't tell her why 5 men were breathing steady under a coat of blood that wasn't theirs to begin with, or why somebody had gone to the trouble of making sure a ranger would find it. That was when Tucker's monitor changed. His pulse, already the weakest of the 5, dropped hard and kept dropping. Not the slow slide of a man sedated, but the specific ugly pattern of something working through his bloodstream on purpose. Napier had seen it exactly once before, on a hiker who'd eaten the wrong route off a Table Rock switchback, a neurotoxin. 45 minutes, by her best field guess, before it reached his lungs and took the breathing with it. 10 years back, 4 miles south of where she knelt now, 2 through hikers had turned up alive in a rock shelter near Table Rock. Unhurt, soaked head to foot, in blood that never matched a single missing person in 3 counties. Nobody was ever charged. Nobody ever explained it. She'd been young enough then to file it under strange and move on. She didn't get to do that anymore. She dug the stimulant kit out from under her radio. Dead now, screen dark, the daughter-in-law's text still sitting unread underneath it. She didn't reach for the phone. Working fast around Tucker, her knee caught the edge of the rug in front of the hearth and dragged it back an inch. Underneath, a hatch, hand cut into the floorboards, the hinges set the exact same way her grandfather used to set hinges on every root cellar he ever built on the family's old parcel. The one they'd sold off years before she pinned on a badge. This cabin hadn't just been built by whoever was using it tonight. It had been built by someone who knew exactly how her family built things. She didn't have time to sit with that. She hit Tucker with the stimulant. His eyes shot open, not groggy, not confused, wide open in a kind of terror she'd only seen a handful of times in her career. His hand found her wrist before he'd even finished blinking, gripping hard enough to bruise, and he pulled her down close enough that she could feel his breath shake. "The blood isn't ours," he whispered. "It wasn't on us when we went to sleep." Then his eyes closed again, and his breathing evened out, slow and steady, same as before, except now she knew what that steadiness was hiding. 45 minutes, no transport, no radio. 4 more men who could wake into the exact same thing Tucker just had. She knelt there in the lantern light, with his words still sitting in her chest like a stone, and for the first time all night, she didn't know what the right next move even looked like, or if there was one. 45 minutes. 1 revived witness who couldn't stop shaking. No transport, no radio. A whiteout past the porch rail thick enough to swallow the parked truck whole entirely. And 6 words she couldn't unhear, looping under everything else she tried to think about. She laid it out fast, the way she'd been trained to lay out any decision with a clock running under it. Leave now, try for higher ground and a signal, and the other 4 men lay unattended on that floor for however long it took, freezing or worse before she made it back. Stay and do nothing, and Tucker's lungs would fail on schedule in under 45 minutes, while whoever built this trap got exactly what they'd been counting on the whole time. A ranger pinned down alone for hours. 1 ranger. 5 men who couldn't move themselves. A storm that had already taken the road, the radio, and half her visibility. And somewhere in all of it, an adversary who hadn't needed to be standing in that room to win. She couldn't outfight something that had already calculated what she'd do before she ever turned onto that gravel spur. She could only work faster than it expected. She went for the hatch, fast now, knees cracking against floorboards, hands raking the rug aside, fingers finding the same hand-cut hinges her grandfather used to set. Whatever else this cellar was, it was solid, dry, cut into rock below the frost line. Below the worst of the wind, cold air poured up out of the open hatch, carrying the smell of packed earth and something faintly mineral underneath it, Iron maybe, or just old stone. She dragged Tucker to the opening first, guided his weight down the ladder rungs one careful foot at a time, his breath ragged and shallow against her shoulder, his skin cold everywhere she touched it. Then Emmett, then Dawson. Cole's dead weight nearly buckled her knees on the third rung, but she got him down. Silas last, the storm screaming through the open door the whole time, wind cutting off her own hearing in long gusting waves, rain coming in sideways to pool black on the floorboards behind her. She could have used that same break in the wind to climb instead of dig. Up toward the ridgeline, toward one bar of signal, toward some slim chance of reaching dispatch herself. She thought about it for exactly as long as it took to look at Tucker's gray face. Below ground, working by headlamp, she got 2 lines into Tucker and held his jaw steady while his breathing leveled out, one shallow pull at a time, until it finally wasn't a fight anymore. His color came back first in his lips, then his fingertips. He was going to make it. She let that land for one full breath before her body told her something else was wrong. The drip. It had been running since she first stepped through that door hours ago. Steady, patient, hitting the same spot on the floorboards above her every few seconds. So constant she'd stopped hearing it as a sound and started hearing it as silence instead. Somewhere in the last few minutes, without her noticing the exact second, it had stopped. She climbed the ladder rung by rung, headlamp cutting a narrow cone through the whiteout pouring in the open door. The floorboards above the trap door sat dry, bone dry, like nothing had ever touched them. She crossed to the front door on legs that didn't feel entirely like her own, and looked down at the row of boots she'd counted twice, hours ago, and counted again now out of pure animal habit. 5 pairs. Not knocked over, not dragged off into the wind, just gone, the way a thing is gone when it decides to stop being there. No drag mark in the mud past the threshold, no boot print heading into the trees, nothing to say which direction it had gone, or whether it had gone anywhere at all. Tucker was breathing even again down below, safe for the moment, in a cellar her own family had cut out of the mountain a generation before she was born. The boots by the door were not there at all, and the drip that had run for 4 straight hours had stopped at the exact same minute they disappeared. As if whatever had been standing over that trap door the whole time had finally gotten what it came for, and simply walked itself back out into the storm, without ever once making a sound she could point to. Backup reached the cabin at first light, the storm finally spent, the gorge below soaked and dripping and ordinary again. All 5 men walked out under their own power, wrapped in emergency blankets, blinking hard against a sun none of them had expected to see again. Tucker went last, the only one of them who'd remember the night clearly instead of in pieces, and within a month, he stopped answering calls from anyone holding a microphone. The county pulled property records the following week, mostly as a formality. What came back wasn't. The parcel the cabin sat on had belonged to the Napier family once, sold off 14 years before Birdie ever pinned on a badge, back when she was still in high school and had no say in the matter. Nobody had ever told her the cabin standing on it now used her grandfather's cellar plan down to the hinge placement. She'd spent her whole career working a gorge she thought she knew, 3 ridgelines over from a floor plan that had, apparently, outlived the family that built it. No name was ever attached to a 6th man. No blood type pulled off those 5 ever matched a missing persons file, not in Burke County, not the old Table Rock case from 10 years back, not anywhere in the state system. Napier requested the file herself, twice, and got the same answer both times. The case went into the same drawer as the rest of it, unsolved, unclosed, the kind that doesn't get shelved so much as it gets forgotten on purpose, by people who'd rather it stayed that way. One detail did surface months later. Buried in a routine tax record, nobody but Napier bothered to read closely, sitting alone at her kitchen table long after Waylon and everyone else in the house had gone to bed. The parcel had changed hands twice more since her family let it go, both times to companies that existed on paper only long enough to sign the deed, then dissolved within the year. Neither company led anywhere. Neither one, as far as anybody could find, had ever had a single employee, or an office, or a phone number that rang through to a real person. The gorge went back to its ordinary April self within a season. Green came in fast over the burn scars where the storm had knocked down half a hillside of rhododendron, and the trail crews never asked twice why that particular hillside needed clearing. The birds came back too, eventually, filling that stretch of woods with the kind of racket that made the whole place sound exactly like it should. She noticed that, the first spring after, in a way she never had before. How loud those mountains actually were. Once a person had spent one night hearing them go completely still. Now, every time Birdie Napier drives that spur alone, she counts the boots by whatever door she's walking toward before she ever checks a single pulse, before she even says hello. Old habit, the kind you don't get to unlearn once it's been taught to you that thoroughly by someone who never bothered to introduce themselves. She never did find out what the elderberry smell was chasing her with, that faint sweetness that still catches her off guard some evenings on the wind. Gone again before she can place it or admit, even to herself, that she's looking for it. She just stopped asking about it out loud anyway. In these mountains, alone is never quite the same thing as unwatched.